Hey everybody, Dev here back from YouNerded.com to give you another review of The Night Of, this time for Season 1, Episode 5, titled The Season of the Witch. This episode did a good job of being a transition episode, but also moving the story forward in a way that was still captivating and didn't feel like it was filler. What happened in this episode is we got Sergeant Box and Helen Weiss on one side trying to gather evidence against Nas, and on the other side we got Chandra and John trying to gather evidence to sort of make Nas look favorable to the jury. On Helen Weiss and Sergeant Box's side, they got the tox screens which showed that Nas had ecstasy and a drug they call K in his system, which is no surprise seeing that we saw Andrea give that to him, but what showed up in his tox screen as well was amphetamine, which we come to later find out is Adderall. And what that shows is basically that Nas used illegal drugs. Even if it was common, it does not make it right, as John said. And another thing that we got were the exact points that Nas traveled to the night he picked up Andrea. And another shady verdict that we got was Helen Weiss going to the medical examiner Henry to see whether the cut on Nas's hand was from him breaking into Andrea's house, again to get back his keys, or was it from a knife slip. And honestly, you can tell that neither one really knows what they're talking about, but obviously in Helen's case, it would be more beneficial if the cut was from the knife, showing that, Nas stabbed her, maybe hit bone, and then sliced his hand open, which immediately makes him look more suspicious and more like the killer than ever before. And those three things are very strong ammo towards Nas in the case, which is going to play out in the trial. And on the other side with John and Chandra, we had them find out the same exact things in terms of the drugs, and they showed that Nas had amphetamines in his system, and that's what they confronted him about in the prison. Another thing they got was Dr. Katz, who they employed to sort of scan the scene as thoroughly as possible. That was the guy with the camera doing the whole little fun bit with that, which I thought was a little bit of a light humor that we probably needed with this show. And then we got him, he found something outside that showed it had blood on it. He said it could be squirrel's blood, but there was blood outside the house, which could be very beneficial in terms of this case. And the one thing that John and Chandra know now is that Trevor, who was walking past Nas and Andrea before they went to the house with a buddy, said he was alone that night. Now, we knew he lied in that first episode, but now we're finally getting the name of the guy who was with, who suspiciously looked back at Nas and Andrea with like a very ill intent kind of look in his eyes, and his name is Dwayne Reed, and we find out that he has a violent history. So just finding Dwayne Reed could be a very beneficial thing for Nas in terms of proving his innocence, because he is now a suspect. And now with the introduction of Dwayne, we now have two suspects, something that we haven't had since this whole series started. Now we have Nas, obviously, and now we have Dwayne, who has a violent past. And that's pretty much what this episode ended on. It was John going after Dwayne on impulse, really just striving to prove Nas's innocence because he knows time is running out. And that sort of lands him in a bad situation. We see him pick up the crowbar, and it ended sort of oddly, but it just shows that, yeah, this guy's not in a good situation and anything can happen now. So we pretty much have to wait till next episode, obviously, to see where that comes to. Then the last thing I want to talk about in this episode is what happened in the prison. And that is pretty much game changing if you think about it. We had Calvin Hart, who threw the acid on Nas last week, sort of get his punishment from Freddie and his other guy there. But obviously Nas was brought in and showed like, hey, you can get your licks in. And he felt kind of hesitant before he gave him the one kick, but then Calvin gave him those comments that sort of triggered something in Nas's head, and it was sort of a stark change, and he went pretty ballistic on him, kicking him in the stomach, stumping him in the face, and punching him even, and just got to the point where Freddie even was kind of shocked. And it just showed a side of Nas that was not pretty and didn't do any favors in terms of the people who were rooting for him, including myself, who I want to see Nas prove innocent, but now seeing this side of him makes me question that. And I'm sure the show wants us to do that, so it's all the more ambiguous by the time this series ends. Like I said in my past reviews, Freddie's protection is something that I wanted Nas to have, but I didn't know what the consequences were going to be. And last week I thought we were done with it when Freddie said, oh, you have knowledge, you're a bright-eyed college kid, I want to learn from you. But this week we see that he actually wants Nas just to smuggle in drugs because he's not, the stereotypical guy who's in prison right now. So just him smuggling drugs will probably be a bit easier to do. And we see that from Nas, and it's not landing him in these great situations. And I can see Freddie sort of keep piling on the task for Nas until things just get overwhelming to the point where something has to pop. I really wanted Freddie's character to be, pretty straightforward, but I guess, like I said, nothing in prison comes without its consequences. It could have been something more stereotypical that he wanted from Nas, but now it seems something more dangerous in terms of drugs, and maybe he's going to want Nas to, hurt someone, as he's training Nas to, get stronger and punch the bag and things like that. So the prison stuff is still very riveting here. It's very interesting to watch, and I'll be interested to see how Nas transitions from, innocent guy to this hardened sort of guy from prison and how that's going to affect the jury when they see him. Overall, I really liked this episode. I thought it had a poppier feel, honestly. You had the stuff with John with the whole Viagra situation, playing that off the pharmacist. You had the medical examiner who really didn't care what happened. He just wanted to just say what Helen did, and sort of, I liked how he had to reiterate and be more believable with the possibly false verdict of the whole knife thing. You had Dr. Katz, who was the photographer, who sort of just was very meticulous about his job and had that sort of wacky personality. But yeah, I thought the episode had those little moments and they were still fun, but we still got very serious stuff as well. John's not in a great situation. Nas is not in a great situation. And Chandra, she just seems like she's trying to just understand Nas himself and just this case, and it's just a whole mess for everybody. So with that, I gave the episode a 90 out of 100, which is a superb score for us at YouNerded. The Night Of has been constantly scoring high this season, and I don't doubt that that's ever gonna drop off with these last 3 episodes that we have left. Anyway, guys, if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want to discuss the show with me, leave a comment below. I'll always be responding to them, or you can tweet at me at nerd.dot on Twitter. Subscribe to the channel, go visit YouNerded and read the written review if you're more into that, and I'll see you guys next week.